music videos are probably going to be the most chaotic film set you've ever been on. It's just the nature of music videos. You're mixing music with film and
cheeks on set while cheeks are bouncing.
Right. Yeah. And
today on Vegas Veteran Voices, we've got Cheeks, an Army veteran, chaplain assistant, turned Hollywood crew dog. From working his first film, Range 15, to 9 seasons of diners, drive-ins, and dives, Cheeks has lived the grind of set life. Fake blood disasters, working with Post Malone, and hauling gear till sunrise, he's done it all. This is the story of a veteran who traded formation runs for film sets and found a new mission in the chaos of Hollywood. Let's dive into it.
I remember I worked on Range 15. That was my very first film project I worked on. And that zombie boxing sequence that they had, that zombie MMA sequence that they had.
Okay.
That was like they rented that ring, right? Mm-hmm. That was all rental stuff. That canvas was real canvas. That was all, right? So when we got fake blood all over it, and that fake blood doesn't come out of that canvas, and we tried using kitty litter to absorb the fake blood, and that just made it worse. It just caked into the canvas.
Yeah. And
again, that's like, you got to buy a new one, they can't rent that out anymore. What are they going to use it for? Like you couldn't even put that on a ship to sail with, like, and so, it's all these little, film is all these little considerations when it comes to things like that. But anyway, so back to my not contrived, but my kind of long story. It was being on set. So we built this, we had to tear down this kitchen set that they had built, which I have a picture. I'm covered in head to toe. I look like a coal miner, basically. I'm covered head to toe in soot, and it was election day. So I have my stupid little I voted sticker on. I'm just covered head to toe in soot. And we broke this whole little set down. The set itself wasn't big. It was a small kitchen interior, but it just was the pain in the butt of doing it, moving all that stuff out to the garbage pile and blah, blah, blah. And there's like 4 of us. And so after that, they go, okay, well, you got to like scrub down the psych wall. So all that soot has embedded itself into the floor of the psych wall, right? And so
that's porous too, right?
Yeah. It's like any primered surface you've ever painted on. Yeah. So I am on my hands and knees for the next 4 hours on set. The shooting unit is off shooting other stuff. I'm back at this psych wall, just me with like a bottle of Simple Green and a Brillo pad, and I'm just like trying to do this whole psych wall by myself. And I was still new enough in film that I couldn't say with certainty that they would probably just paint over this, right? Which is what most psych wall owners do. They just hit it with a layer of white and call it good. So I'm on my hands and knees for like the next 3 or 4 hours. Simple Green. Yeah. And then the owner of the psych wall goes, yeah, that's fine. I'm probably just going to paint over this anyway. And I was like, boy, man.
Yeah. But that's the thing, though. If you didn't take the time and due diligence to do it, he would have been pissed. Like, that's just the way the world works.
Right. And she was like, on the more creative side, I guess I'll say, she was pretty lax about things. And so what made me laugh was that she watched me do this for hours and then came over and was like, yeah, I'm probably just you don't have to do all that. And I'm like, what do you mean don't have to? I did all of that already. But it's very fortunate. And I think that's where like being in the military informs experiences like that, right? I've done dumb military shenanigans before. I've done, like...
Oh, I'd be surprised if you didn't.
Right, like go fill sandbags, right? Or move sandbag. Like, I remember on my second deployment, we were in, not CAF. We were flying into CAF from Kyrgyzstan. Yeah. We were in Kyrgyzstan doing our transfer. And... we showed up. It was a late flight. I think when we got in, it was like 2:30 in the morning. We're all exhausted. We just flew in from the States. And they're like, okay. And it's wintertime in Kyrgyzstan. So it's like -15 out. It's pretty cold. And most of us didn't have like winter clothing, right? Yeah. We were expecting it. And so they're like, all right, line all your duffel bags up on this side of this road. And so, there's like 200 of us. And we all line our duffel bags up. And they're like, all right, go go rack out in this little building. You can get literally like be back here in an hour and 20 minutes, right? Yeah. And so they didn't tell us why. They just said come back in an hour and 20 minutes. And so we all like got an hour of nap time, and then we assembled again. And they're like, okay, so move the duffel bags from that side of the road to that side of the road. And we're like, why didn't we just do that to begin with? There was nothing here when we got here. Like, why? I could be sleeping right now because the flight's not for another. So it's stuff like that in the military that, you know, you are able to carry that over to film experiences and not let, you know, civilian shenanigans really frustrate you with stuff like that. So,
and that's the thing too, is one of the things that I didn't really like about the military is there's that old guard mentality of they need to pay their dues. So they put you things that are more difficult than they need to be in order to try and teach you life lessons. Yeah. And I don't know, I feel like that's kind of an outdated mentality, like the wax on, wax off type.
Yeah. I think there's some value in like, it's like when they would send you on a run and they go, okay, 2 more miles, and you do 2 more miles, and they go, okay, 4 more miles. And you're like, I think that's good for your brain in some aspects. But I do think that if people who rely on that as like a leadership pillar is not, no, it's right. Like eventually you need to graduate above getting used to doing dumb repetitious tasks. Yes. And you need to actually start specializing in whatever your skill is, or you need to start developing into like an NCO as a leader and blah, blah, blah. Right. So definitely take your point. I do think that there's a little bit of value in it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm guilty of it too. So one of my sailors, showed up to work hungover as shit. Yeah. But like to the point where I didn't trust him on an aircraft just because he just reeked of booze. And I was like, you need to go home. You need to take a shower, get some coffee, and come back. And then all I had him do was scrub pad eyes all day long because like I didn't trust him to be touching any of the equipment. Right. But like that job needed to be done anyways.
Yeah. And that's a really good way of saying, listen, like you've not met the standard. You kind of let me down a little bit as your leader, you know. Maybe I'm not going to like destroy you with PT or whatever, but I'm also, you know, but yeah, so, you know, aircraft are highly complex systems, but there is that menial work that needs to be done. So, you know, you kind of teach them like, listen, like you don't get to do your whole job because I don't trust you essentially today. Yeah. You know, and, I did it on set one time. I had a production assistant. So after a while, I would say around the second year, one of the things I was really good as a production assistant was packing production trucks. Like I had these really immaculate looking production trucks, which means that equipment comes off and on really quickly. And it's really helpful, especially if you have company moves. Company move is basically we start at a location and then we pick up the whole shoot and we move to a different location.
Oh, that sounds like so much fun.
Oh, I did a shoot in, I can't remember what park it was, Malibu Park, I think. We had 4 company moves that day. That was a standard 12-hour day, but we would shoot here, pick everything up, break all the lights down, pick it up, move it again. You know, it's definitely takes discipline. But so I was pretty good at packing production trucks, and so I quickly would start becoming what they call like key PA, which is not like a real boy position per se. It's kind of a made up position. It's really like Lord of the Flies almost. I'm like head minion, you know what I mean? But you know, I would look out for. I would make sure the other PAs were staying on, production assistants were staying on task, and they had everything they needed. I was really big about, when I was a key PA, I was really big about making sure that my PAs were able to get breakfast and to take breaks. Because a lot of times PAs in production are the first people on location or on set. They're setting up all the tables, they're setting up all the chairs, they're setting up all the pop-up tents, right? And so I've been on productions where they just let PAs who show up at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, they just let them work through till lunch, and they don't touch. They maybe get some coffee, but no food. And I'm like, that's not good for anybody. You know, I want you dog tired by afternoon, and you know, who knows how long this day might actually go. So I was always really big about having the set up and having productions stuff squared away. And then tell my guys, go get breakfast, you know, bacon, eggs, pancakes, whatever. Just go grab it, go get breakfast, sit down for 15, 20 minutes, have a good meal, and then let's rock and roll the rest of the day.
So in that mid-level leadership, you were the mid-level leader that you wish you had.
Yeah, assistant to the regional manager. Yeah. So I had a PA one time that showed up dressed in like Supreme everything, right? Just like Stussied out, or I guess whatever the kids are saying. Fleek. His drip was lit, fam. And that's not the clothes you wear to be a production assistant. That's not the clothes you wear when you're going to like take out trash. That's not the clothes you wear when you're going to bend over and scrub stuff all day and blah, blah, blah. Right. So I exclusively put him on trash detail to kind of teach him, like, don't show up to set dressed like that anymore. Yeah. Like, show up to set dressed to work. Like, it's not the time to flex your style. I should say, but
yeah. You've worked on a few notable things, correct?
Yeah. So the longest running thing I've worked on was probably Guy's Grocery Games for Food Network. That was really cool. I did 9 seasons of that.
That looks like a ton of fun, but a production nightmare.
It's been going for so long that everything's dialed in.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. And they, I've worked on both Triple G and Triple D, so Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. Triple D just got nominated for another Emmy, I believe.
Good for them.
Yeah. And I can't remember, it's not their first nomination. They've been nominated before. But that also itself is a logistical miracle. It's a very well-oiled machine. We're talking about all that lighting equipment has to fly. It has to get packed away correctly. It has to get notated where it's going correctly, right? Like, people have to manage all of that. These guys, I posted about this the other day when I found out about them getting nominated. Triple G and Triple D are really some of in terms of the reality TV landscape, which can be a kind of morally ambiguous wasteland, if not total brain rot, right? It's not good for you to ingest reality TV, I don't think, which is why I worked in it. But in the reality TV landscape, Triple D and Triple G are really some of the more wholesome interactions that exist, right? So with Triple G, Guys Grocery Games, it's bringing these notable or these chefs into the public light, because then they get to represent their restaurant, they get to represent themselves, they get to tell their story. It's all very cool. And then with Triple D, it's the restaurant version of that, or not just the restaurant version, but you have these locations that are really cool. Yeah. You have these chefs who have, built these menus from maybe nothing, or they've come in and revolutionized an existing location. We take about maybe 2 or 3 opening business days of them from them to shoot our product. In return, they get pretty much primetime endorsement from Guy Fieri, right? And then they get to put the thing on the wall. Guy Fieri ate here. We're told. That's what we're told. That generally when a restaurant gets visited by Guy and is on the show, they see usually about a 150 to 300% increase in business.
And that makes sense too. Like, I know there's restaurants here in Vegas that I wouldn't have known about unless it was for Guy.
Yeah, from Diners and from Triple D and and so to trade that off where we get to sell a good television show and they get like
free advertising,
right, and free endorsement.
Yes,
it's really cool to be a part of that. And those are 2 separate teams. Sometimes we have like people that work on both. I was one of those. I worked on both. And those teams are it was a really cool experience. And I started as a production assistant on Triple G, and then they would kind of let me day play on the assistant camera. That's where when I decided I want to be a real boy. Yeah. That's where I decided I want to go as camera department. And so learning how to be, there's camera department generally consists of, as a camera team, there's the camera operator, there's the first AC and the second AC. Second AC, like if you ever see people when they do the slate, do the little clacker, that's the second AC's job. Among other things, maintaining camera batteries and lens accessories and stuff like that, doing lens changes. And then the first AC's job is to maintain and build the camera, help the videographer, cinematographer, camera operator with what they're doing. And so it is, I liken it, building a camera is very similar to like building a weapon system, kind of like a heavy machine gun or like a 240 Bravo or a 50 caliber. It's all got tripod goes down first, and then you got to build onto that, and you got to build the plate correctly, and you got to use the mounting system correctly, and then lens has to go in correctly. Lens has to be handled a certain way, right? So there's a lot of film culture that has actually taken over from the military. Post World War II, a lot of veterans got out of the Army, Navy, out of the military, and came over to work in the film industry. And so if and when you get on a like a set, you'll immediately recognize like company level leadership roles.
Yes.
Like your first AD is generally going to be your first sergeant.
Yeah.
The director is going to be your company commander or battalion commander, right? Or your producers are going to be your XO, brigade, blah, blah, blah. But each department does just their job, and they don't really deviate to other people's tasks unless they absolutely have to, unless it's a low budget thing. If it's union, they're definitely not going to touch other people's stuff, right? So like you're not going to see a camera guy touching the sound guy's stuff. You're not going to see sound guy touching the electrician's stuff. That's just the nature of union stuff. But yeah, so I think it's a good industry for veterans to transition into. I was very fortunate to be basically right place, right time, working on Range 15. From Range 15, one of the what was she doing at the time? I think she was the associate producer. She basically worked with me a little bit and was like, this Cheeks is cool. I like this guy. And so she brought me onto a Chevy commercial. That was like a pretty big commercial.
Oh, nice.
And then from that Chevy commercial, I started working music videos. And from music videos, I started working in normal commercials, and then started working in indie features and stuff like that. And so I was
climbing your way up.
Yeah, and just expanding the types of sets that I had been on, because each set environment's a little bit different. Music videos are probably going to be the most chaotic film set you've ever been on. It's just the nature of music videos. You're mixing music with film and
Cheeks on set while cheeks are bouncing.
Right, yeah, and I have a project like that where I was like, what am I working on here? What's going on? Nobody told me about this. So yeah, I mean, I've worked with that Circles video that Post Malone did. I worked on that set. Which was really cool to see, because that was a hell of a day. That was
it looked like it.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a nightmare. Some people were not performing tasks they were supposed to be performing. I'm not going to name names, but definitely it took a little bit of extra effort from some of us to really pick up the slack for that. And, logistically, we're shooting up in the hills of California. It's a big, we shot, I think there was 5 different locations in that area that we were shooting at. So we didn't do company moves per se, but we did have like a central hub where all the equipment should have been.
Yeah.
And I told them, hey, we should set up in the middle so we have distribution evenly, because production is not just, we're the ones bringing water to people on set. We're the ones bringing, we're getting all the knickknacks, and people go, hey, I need this right now. Nope, we didn't do that. We put us at the farthest portion away from any of the other locations, and we didn't have a like a gator or a side-by-side or anything. And we're talking like it's a country mile to each of the locations. Yeah. So it's like me with like 2 pallets of water, a pallet of water on each shoulder, trying to get to trying to do the airborne shuffle to get to the other side of the location. And it's like, it was hot. It was a hot day, and it was really long. They had to build a fake pond for that, which consisted of, it would dry out so fast. We literally had 4 water trucks come dump water and then drive away. And then by the time they thought they were set up, it would have to get another water truck in to dump all this water. So, but it was really cool to see that kind of get and Post Malone, from the interaction that I did have with him, was a really nice, fantastic guy.
Oh, he really seems like it, really down to earth.
Yeah. When we wrapped that night, he went around and shook everyone's hand and said, thank you for being on set today, which I thought was really cool. Yeah. I've worked around people who out of here, right? Which is fine. They're talent. They have stuff to do. Yeah.
I can tell you a nightmare story off set.
Oh, of course.
Just because I am under... Cool.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's nothing to do with filming. It's from my time in the military.
Yeah.
But there was some crossover with Hollywood in that, and it wasn't necessarily the best thing, and some people got fired. And
Yeah. And honestly, film is full of those stories, you know. And it's funny because you'll be out in the wild shooting something, and some random guy will come up to you and be like, oh, I worked on Roadhouse back in... And you're like, okay, Grandpa, let's get you back to bed. Like, none of this means anything to me. Not that it's not an important film or an important set to have worked on, but it's like, I don't know you, first of all. And it's second of all, like, I'm busy. Like, I'm working right now, like, I'm not sitting around just chilling. I'm like trying to hang a light or something.
Yeah. I don't want to hear you tell me about the time that you almost touched Patrick Swayze.
Right. Which is like, it makes you kind of sad because, there's that part of me that really adores documentaries and stuff like that. And like, God, this guy's got a really cool story, I'm sure, but I just can't be bothered right now. Like, I have work to do.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about how, before you ever picked up going into Hollywood, you worked in the Army. You were a chaplain's assistant?
I was, yeah. So, Cheeks, the chaplain assistant. Born in Washington State, grew up in Pierce County area, went to high school in Puyallup, at a high school called Cascade Christian. And I always knew I wanted to join the military. I was like that nerd that would wear like combat pants and like the BDUs and like blouse my boots and everything. And there was a couple of us, but I was one of them. And I knew I wanted to join the military when I was younger. I want to say like 7. This is prior to 9/11 happening. But it's just like, it's the most cringy sounding thing ever. But so we lived in Spanaway at the time, and I was outside playing, and I saw it was a C-171, one of the older transports, flying over, and it occurred to me that aircraft was full of people that I knew it was a military aircraft. I think it was like 7 or 8.
Yeah,
it's a very profound thing to think, 7 or 8, I guess. But it occurred to me that people in that aircraft were doing that for my benefit, and like it was an honorable thing to serve. And so I guess it was kind of, that seed was planted in me to like want to be in the military. And like growing up, I still had lots of growing up to do. 9/11 of course happens. And so that really changes the landscape of serving at the time, and what it would mean to serve. But over time, after like, I used to love reading books. I think the first war book I ever read was called 7 Roads to Hell by a paratrooper named Don Burgett. And that really was my, so I'm a faithful person, so I wouldn't think anything's really serendipitous in my life. But when I used to go to my doctor's office, he had these little toys I used to get at the end of every appointment. I used to always love playing with the little paratroopers. I used to throw them up and the parachute would open and float to the ground. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. Fast forward to, I start reading Donald Burgett's books, I find Band of Brothers. I read Band of Brothers before Band of Brothers had become the HBO series. Back then the problem was not having HBO. So so luckily I had a friend whose parents had HBO and we were able to go watch all the episodes. But like Saving Private Ryan was just prior to that, and so anyway, I go basically in high school. I basically developed that I wanted to join the Army. I had found out that both of my grandpas I'm named after both my grandpas. Both of my grandpas were in the military, were in the Army. And my father's father, Grandpa George, was a paratrooper. He was in the 11th Airborne, and then he actually was one of the last glidermen, where he had to go through glider training before they did away with gliders because those things crash and kill dudes a lot. And so, but both my grandpas actually, my mother's father, he served in the at the end of World War II, or he served in World War II, and then he served in the Korean War as well. And then my Grandpa George served in the Korean War, and he was at the Busan perimeter. So basically, after the North Koreans had pushed everyone south, they were holding that little 6-mile perimeter at the southern tip of the Korean Peninsula. My grandpa was with the 5th Regimental Combat Team that came in amongst other units to reinforce the Busan perimeter, and then eventually the breakout at Busan, which led to the North Koreans fleeing north. But back to me. So I knew that I wanted to join the Army, and I knew that I wanted to go to airborne school. I wanted to be a paratrooper. And so after I graduated high school, I had kind of taken a job working at a local steakhouse in Puyallup called The Keg. And The Keg was kind of like, at the time, it was like a nicer restaurant. Like if you wanted to go really ritzy, you'd have to go to Seattle. But for like Puyallup, the keg was like pretty good dining, and I was making tips. I was making good tip money, right? And so like I'm 18, like I had worked in catering prior to that, but I had never really made, $200 in a night working tips, and then on top of what I was making. So I was like, this is great, but I was also like, you get off work at 2:00 in the morning and then you sleep until, whatever. And I was still living with my parents at the time. They didn't really like that. And so my mom actually goes, what about that dream you had of joining the Army? And I very much was like, the Army will always be there. It's not going anywhere, right? And she took that personally. And so I want to say it was the next day or that weekend, she woke me up at like 6:00 one morning. She goes, all right, get up, get dressed. And I was like, what's going on? She goes, we're going to go talk to a recruiter. And I was like, oh, all right. And so I went and talked to I went to the recruiter station in Spanaway and spoke to the recruiter. And, I didn't know about like jobs in the Army too much. I didn't know about this whole like pogue, combat arms, grunt, all that cultural stuff that you learn after you do basic. But so my recruiter was like, where did you go to high school? I was like, yeah, Cascade Christian in Puyallup. And he goes, you ever thought about being a chaplain assistant? And I was like, no, like, I don't know. Sure, if you think it's cool. And he goes, yeah, you basically work in the church and you work for the unit pastor and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, you get to work at church and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, okay, that could be cool, I guess. Like, no clue where my military career is going to take me or whatever. So I enlisted as a chaplain assistant. And I wanted airborne in my contract. And he had told me, we don't really need airborne chaplain assistants. So I can't get that in your contract. I was like, all right. So anyway, so I go to basic, at basic at Fort Jackson, and then get to AIT. Our AIT, I guess we were the first week of AIT that had gotten shortened by a week, and they did that by adding a day onto our training schedule. So we didn't have Saturdays off, basically. We just had Sundays. But even still, most of us were doing classes on Sundays because that's when chapel happens, is on Sundays. So anyway, our AIT only ended up being 6 weeks, but at week 3, they had 2 chaplain assistants come from Fort Bragg down to Fort Jackson, and they brought a parachute. And, they were asking for volunteers who wants to try on the parachute, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, yeah, totally, try the parachute on. And then they like deployed the parachute, pulled it out, show how it works and everything. And they're like, all right, so bottom line is we need as many airborne chaplain assistants as we can get. And I was like, yo, this guy right here, like I want to jump out of airplanes. So I had to do the volunteer thing, or you have to go to airborne school, you have to volunteer for it. You can't be assigned to it. So I had to volunteer to attend airborne school, I think is the correct phrase for that. I can't remember, but I got a slot for airborne school out of AIT. So I went to airborne school, and they had already kind of floated where I was going to go at the end of AIT. They kind of start telling you about where you're going to get assigned. I was supposed to go to Fort Sill, Oklahoma to be with a AIT artillery battery, to be one of their chaplain assistants. And when I graduated airborne school, I got reassigned from Fort Sill, Oklahoma to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I got reassigned to 5th Battalion and 4th Psychological Operations Group. And so I did my first year and a half there. And there's chaplain assistant is, first, someone's going to freak out, I'm sure. It's not called chaplain assistant anymore. It's called RAS. It's Religious Affairs Specialist. I was never a religious affairs specialist. I was always chaplain assistant while I was in. So I'm just going to call it chaplain assistant. But chaplain assistant, there's definitely pretty, I'll say, not cush parts of it. But it's not challenging in what I guess most people would typify like the military experience. It is and it isn't. It just really depends on your assignment, in which you don't get to choose your assignment. So unless you become like a funds manager and you just like live at the chapel and you handle budgets all day, then that's going to be your experience. But there's lots of chaplain assistants out there that end up with line units that are out in the field with their guys. But I would say the unique challenges to being a chaplain assistant are that you have to, as a young guy, have a lot of emotional maturity coming into the job. The first memorial ceremony I ever did was for one of my soldiers whose husband plotted to and assisted in her being murdered for insurance money for SGLI. And so what he had done basically was we had a new psyoper, young guy. His name was Matt Quapple, and Richard basically started grooming Matt into this mentality that, hey, you're in special operations now. You're going to be expected to do wet work, stuff like that. Matt's all of like 19 or 20 at this point, right? And so real wet behind the ears. Oh yeah, I'm here to do whatever you need me to do, blah blah blah. And so Richard basically started building this target package on his wife Christina, my soldier. And as the story goes, according to Matt, he didn't realize that Christina was the mark until right up until the actual murder. And he tried to get out of it, but Richard threatened him and said, "You know too much. I'm going to kill you." Blah blah blah. And so, so Matt ends up murdering her. And so I had to do her memorial ceremony, which was my first memorial ceremony. But then I also had to go to Fayetteville County, where they were staying at the time because they hadn't been transferred out yet. And I had to go check on them, me and a chaplain, to go see how they were doing. I wasn't incredibly close with with Christina, because I was kind of a new chaplain assistant. I'd maybe been around 4 or 5 months by the time this all took place. But, this obviously had a very profound effect on everyone in her unit.
Oh, I bet.
And so having to spend time with them and try and do what we call ministry of presence, be around them and console them and kind of help them rationalize this. Combat deaths it's not easy to rationalize, but there's I think it's the nature of the business. There's a little bit of that attached to it, right?
Yeah.
Like we work in the military and people die in the military. No one expects someone in their unit to get murdered by their spouse, really, And so she was very well liked, and she was an excellent psyoper. So it was challenging to be a comfort to her, to the guys in her company and in our unit, but then also have to go check on Matt and Richard and see how you doing, and ask them those questions. And I can't even drink yet. I'm 20 at this point. That's a lot for a 20-year-old to try and interpret and rationalize at the time.
Yeah, because you really need to be able to be completely impartial to both sides of it and give that comfort no matter who it is.
Yeah, I'd really put my best foot forward with those two. Richard didn't really talk. Matt talked a little bit, but nothing that he was under advice of his lawyers not to really talk about anything.
Yeah,
but I knew Matt. Matt was, up until that point, Matt was shaping up to be a good new soldier. And the people in his, so far as I could tell, the people in his squad and his detachment, that's what they're called. The soldiers in his detachment were really taking to him. It was kind of the normal shenanigans. One time I walked into their their detachment, and I found Matt duct taped upside down to a wall locker, right? But he was laughing. He was having a good time, and they cut him down eventually. But it's stuff like that where it really seemed like he was starting to fit in, and so we didn't know immediately how she died or what had happened. That came 2 weeks later. But we did all know that we saw the MPs pull up to where the PSYOP detachment was at, and saw Matt getting led away in handcuffs, and it was kind of, we started getting the story after that. But that's a lot to kind of handle professionally, I think, as a 20-year-old. And it just, from there, memorial ceremonies don't get any easier. I don't know that I did. I think, a couple for retirees and stuff, and that's just nature of being, if I have chapel duty that weekend and there's a memorial ceremony, you're just going to work it.
Right.
And you learn how to do, that's your bread and butter is memorial ceremonies, unfortunately. So, but then, I go to, I got PCS'd basically from PSYOP to for Special Forces Group. What had happened was I watched one of my PSYOP detachments. PSYOP doesn't deploy en masse like a conventional unit would. PSYOPers are just kind of augmentees. They kind of get deployed like that. So they'll push out an element of PSYOPers, and then that element of PSYOPers will be assigned to usually like a special operations task force or something like that. And then they'll kind of get divvied out amongst whoever needs them, blah, blah, blah. And so I watched one of my companies leave for Iraq. And I was still kind of young in the military. I didn't really understand why I wasn't going with them. All I knew is that I wasn't going with them. That made me really upset. And I was at the flight line saying goodbye to these guys, me and the chaplain, as they were flying to Iraq. And I remember I was crying because I was so upset. I wanted to be where my soldiers were. That was my job. I spent all this time getting to know these guys. And so I had my first contract was kind of unique. I had one of those 2-year contracts that also encompassed training. So by the time I had gotten done with airborne school, like most of my contract was already completed. I think I got into basic training in January. And by the time I got out of airborne school, it might have been like June, July. Yeah. So, that's like 6-7 months off my contract already, and I'm not even really in the Army yet. So, I was starting to come up on like reenlistment basically. And, I'm starting to show up on the retention guys, radar and whatnot. And, prior to this, I had gone to, PSYOPers sometimes get detailed out to what's called Robin Sage. Robin Sage is the penultimate field exercise that the guys going through SFAS and the Q course, the Green Berets going through the Q course. It's like the penultimate field exercise they do prior to getting their Green Beret. Excuse me, and their tab. And I was a G, which is like a like guerrilla war role player, and essentially what Robin Sage is in a nutshell is these SF ODAs, these trainee ODAs will go into this fake country, so Pineland, and they have to meet up with the locals. They have to build rapport. They have to they have to teach, train, and mentor these guys into like a cohesive fighting unit, right? And so they're, as role players, we kind of got to have a little fun with it. We would set these like cultural booby traps for them around the bivouac site. So they had like the guys that I ended up working with, from what I recall, they had like a hell of an infill. So they had like parachuted in, and then they had gotten trapped in a river, and they got ambushed in a river, and they still have all their gear on them. And so they had to like flee this river, and it was like a 6-mile like run basically to our bivouac site. And we had like designated little parts of the camp. We did this prior to them arriving, but we had designated little parts of the camp as like sacred holy sites, but we didn't tell them about it. And so they would like go to lean against a tree, and we'd be like, we'd start freaking out. So you just throw little shenanigans like that at them. But I had this accent that I was doing. I had like a fake Russian accent that I was doing. And so
would you like to share that with us?
I talk like this all the time, and it's not a very good accent, but it was comical. And so I got to know a couple of the guys really well. And one of them was a good friend of mine named Kyle. And Kyle was one of the 18 Deltas. He gave us a little hip pocket class on how to do IVs. So my first IV was out in the forest in North Carolina during Robin Sage. And they liked me, and so they would take me out on missions and stuff like that. And I was really skinny back then. So obviously you give like the smallest dude the medium or the heavy machine gun. And so I don't have any pictures of me doing this, but they would give me the 240 Bravo with like 1,000 rounds in a backpack. And that's how it was. It was really kind of like Wolverine's style shenanigans. Yeah, so we did all these different kinds of missions. Not that anything we did is top secret, but I'm pretty sure people at Robin Sage would like me to not totally detail how that goes. So
that makes sense. Sometimes it's not great to open up the curtain behind us.
Yeah. There's plenty of resources out there on how Robin Sage goes, but so yeah, I ended up doing Robin Sage, and I knew about SF through that experience. I knew about special forces through that experience at Robin Sage, and so I ended up in this like development interview, basically with the chaplain assistant for USASOC, which is Special Operations Command for the Army. And I had known him at this point. We were, I was like one of not many special operations chaplain assistants on Fort Bragg at the time. And so he pulled me into his office, and master sergeant type, and he starts asking me like, okay, so where do you see yourself in 5 years, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm getting out. And he goes, why? You're a good soldier. And I said, I just watched all my guys leave without me. Like, it's not why I joined. I had a little bit more courtesy. Like, I wasn't just talking to a master sergeant like that. But, I told him, like, master sergeant, like, I did watch most of my guys just leave without me, and that really tore me up. And I didn't like that. And so if that's how it's going to be, I don't really want to be here. And so he goes, well, you're from Tacoma, right? And I go, yeah, Puyallup, Tacoma. I was born in Tacoma. And he goes, what about 275, 2nd Ranger Battalion? And when I got out of airborne school and I had gotten PSYOP, I was in fantastic shape. I did not have a chaplain for about 6 months. So it was World of Warcraft and pizza for most of the time. And
like dogs without horses?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the dogs without horses. They're just running amok. And love that line. John Mulaney. So yeah, basically, like I was the only one in the chaplain office, right? And it's like my chaplain office was squared away, but like when the dogs, when the cat's away, the mice will play, or the mice will not go to PT for lots of the time. And so literally I would show up for formation and they'd say fall out and conduct PT, and I would go right back to the barracks and I would sleep until work call. Because I was staying up all night playing World of Warcraft. So I had gained quite a bit of weight, and I was not in great shape. And so when he pitched 275 at me, I was like, nope, they will eat me alive. I will not do good. And I was also, by this point, like, I had heard stuff about the Ranger Regiment, and it's not that there's anything wrong with the Ranger Regiment. Being in the Ranger Regiment, if you're around it, which I did get to be around it a little bit, that's a lifestyle. Yeah. That's dudes that are in the Ranger Regiment, that stay in the Ranger Regiment, that's a certain type of person. Yes. That is successful there. And I mean, quite frankly, I didn't feel like I would be successful there. And I had known some of the chaplain assistants that had worked at like 3rd Battalion, 1st Battalion, and stuff like that. So I had more experience with SF. And so he said, well, what about 1st Special Forces Group? And I was like, what about 1st Special Forces Group? And he goes, well, yeah, you're from Tacoma, 1st Group, 2nd Battalion, 1st Group's right there. They need a new chaplain assistant. So yeah, maybe we can make that happen for you. And like the contract reenlistment game, I was a little bit more savvy to it at this point. And so I was like, well, if like the paperwork shows up, I might sign it. Right. Yeah. So I wasn't really committing to anything. But then like the next week I got contacted by, not Van, I can't remember his last name. It's not Sergeant Major Starling. It was Sergeant Major, one of the Sergeant Major, Chaplain Assistant Sergeant Major before Sergeant Major Starling, contacted me and said, 2nd Battalion, 1st Group's yours if you want to take it. And so I was like, yeah. He goes, all right, just go to retention, sign reenlistment papers, and we'll cut your orders. So called my girlfriend, soon to be ex-wife at the time. I said, hey, I'm reenlisting. I'm coming home I'm going to be stationed at Fort Lewis with 1st Group. So, and that was being assigned to 1st Group was a really cool experience. So like when you get into the special operations community, you kind of eventually will have your hua broken, which is like, we don't say that word. That's like their part of their cultures. We don't do big Army isms. So, I got my hua broken when we were on the back of the LMTV to Robin Sage. We were getting trucked out there, and I was talking to one of the other role players who was a candidate going through the Q course at the time, but he was a E5 already because they all go through as NCOs. And so he was kind of explaining to me like how it would be, because I guess he had done Robin Sage before, right? Yeah. And so he was kind of explaining to me like what it would be like and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, okay, hua, hua. And he looked at me and he goes, don't ever say that word again. And I was like, oh. And I was so like kind of mini institutionalized by that point, because I've been in a training environment for so long, for pretty much the entirety of my career at that point. So I was so like, it was like the dun 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 dun, like I was trying to reboot what word to say that wasn't hua. And he goes, Roger, copy, got it. These are all acceptable alternatives to hua. Don't ever say hua again. And I was like, Roger that. And then so after PSYOP, they PCS'd me to First Special Forces Group, and I had to get back in shape, which I did. And then I had to basically, I don't want to go too deep into it. I kind of consider myself professional in some aspects. I didn't have a really good working relationship with my first chaplain. And so a lot of my experience at First Group in the beginning was getting to know the team guys. Incredibly challenging to walk up to a team room door and be like, hey guys, it's me, your chaplain assistant. Want to be pals, right? And they're like, what are you doing here? And it's like most of the team guys were nice enough, to be like, we're busy, right? It was really, I think, this is where chaplain assistants make their money, is like going into being good at PT, which I wasn't, but I was getting better, and be good at shooting, and then being able to read a room, know when you're wanted, know when you're not wanted, know when someone wants you to talk, know when someone wants you to be quiet and listen. It's all these things. And so we did a shoot course. We called it SIFBUCS. It was Special Forces Basic Combat Shooting Course Support. And then there was they did one for the new team guys that had just come out of SWIC into the battalion. And that's where I made some friends. I made friends with all the support guys that were new like me. They were going through it, but then we were working alongside team guys, because a lot of group culture is the team guys work with the support guys a lot, because they're going to need us out on the ODAs or out in austere little camps and stuff like that. They're going to need a mechanic who has a good head on his shoulders. They're going to need the commo guy. They're going to need all of that. So it's not uncommon for us to train side by side on stuff like that. And I made friends with some of the team guys that were new, and then I used that as an excuse to show up to team rooms and kind of work my magic a little bit and be like, hey, is Joe in? I just wanted to see how Joe was doing. And then Joe would be like, hey, Cheeks, what's going on, man? Having a nickname like Cheeks is easy. It really was a blessing early on. I got Cheeks my last name's Agilian, and it's not pronounced the way it's spelled. And so when I was in basic training, it was week 0 or something, but it was me and another Filipino guy. His last name is Aguilar. And then it was 2 of my Hispanic brothers, and then a couple white guys, and we're all just sitting in this little circle, and we still had we called them our mushroom suits. So there was the old Army PTs. They hadn't transitioned to the new ones fully yet. So there's the gray sweats that said Army on them and stuff. Hated them. They were the worst. We threw them away the first chance we got. I wish I would have kept mine, now that I think about it, but we threw them away the first chance we got. And it was nickname day, I guess, and we're all just sitting around in the bay, and they were looking at my name tape, and they're like, yeah, Cheeks. And I was like, cool, that's a cool nickname. And so that just carried on through basic training and AIT, and all my drill sergeants would call me Cheeks and stuff like that. And the occasional random drill sergeant, are you okay, soldier? Why's your face so red? I'm just always like this drill sergeant, So having a nickname like Cheeks is a really great icebreaker. And so I'd be at the team room door. Hey, Cheeks, come on in, man. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
What are you guys working on? And, eventually you build that rapport. with these team guys, and in the odd event that they need to schedule the chapel for some training or something like that. But those are little families, and it's really challenging initially to what they call a value add, right? You have to kind of make yourself like necessary to them, and it was really cool. I usually tell people it's obviously something I'm very proud of to say that I got assigned to 2nd Battalion for a Special Forces group, that I worked with those guys, that I did my first deployment with those guys. But it's the guys that keep in touch that really are what matter to me. Not that anyone owes me that, but to me, that's like that's the indicator that I was good at what I did, that guys would bother to remember me or to keep in touch with me, still call me brother, stuff like that. So, I did my first deployment with them in 2010. Went to Afghanistan. We were based out of Camp Brown, which is the Special Operations Task Force for Kandahar Airfield at the time. Yeah. And some shenanigans there. It's where I fell in love with, we'll call it the Commonwealth at large. Brits, Australians, Canadians, the Scots, the Irish, any of the Commonwealthers that I could interact with. I thought they were just fantastic, fabulous people. I spent a lot of time at the British PX coffee tea area. It's called the NAFI. Yeah. And I made a lot of British friends and stuff like that. Still keep in touch with them. I would sneak out to go hang out with them at the end of the day, because like I said, I didn't have a really good relationship with my chaplain, and so I would sometimes create work for myself to be away from him. But so I did my first deployment with them, and then admittedly got in a little bit of trouble. I was a little unsavory, and got reassigned from 2nd Battalion 1st Group to 1st Squadron 14th Cav. 3rd Striker Brigade, 2nd Infantry Division. And I went to them like in my dwell time after my first deployment in between. And so I had just gone to JRTC for the second time with group, and technically I was like approved to go back to a deployment if I was supposed to. Yeah. So I got in trouble, and I basically gotten referred to the post chaplain assistant for Fort Lewis, Joint Base Lewis McChord. And so he was Sergeant Major Sina Diaz. I think that was he. There's 2 sergeant majors I ended up interacting with at the post level, but he was basically like, hey, Cheeks, check it out. People had worked with me before on Joint Base Lewis McChord, so I knew, and chaplain assistant is like a small community. There's only one of us per battalion. Yeah. So we get to know each other on post and stuff like that. So people had worked with me before, and he goes, listen, like, just from asking around other people on post, other chaplain assistants, like, it seems like you're a good dude. You just made bad decision. So he's like, we're going to get you put in this artillery unit. They're not going anywhere. Get your head on straight. We'll get you, if you need some counseling or whatever, get you some counseling. But, we're going to stick you over here for now. And we'll get you back to doing good things and working for, doing what you're doing best, being a good soldier. I was like, roger that, blah, blah, blah. Literally a week later, I think I was like out at the range or something. And he called me on my cell phone, and he goes, hey, Cheeks, Sergeant Major, blah, blah, blah. It came, his name came up. So I stepped away, and I said, hey, Sergeant Major, how you doing? And he goes, I'm sorry. I really tried to avoid doing this to you. It's a chaplain assistant for this cavalry squadron that can't deploy because he's the sole surviving male heir. So it's like the Saving Private Ryan situation almost, right? So he goes, I can't deploy him now, basically, because he had a death in the family. So I need you to go back to Afghanistan. And I was like, ugh. I've only been back by 8 months, I think, at this point. And so I ended up I got assigned to 1st Squadron, 14th Cavalry Regiment. I had spent the entirety of my career, so pretty much 4.5 years in Special Operations at this point. Special Operations Army, regular Army are 2 fairly significantly different entities, right? And so cavalry, I wouldn't say was particularly like intense, the transition, but I was a little nervous because I had grown up with like relaxed haircut and like cuffed sleeves, hands in my pockets a lot of the time, talking to E7s, being like, hey, bro, dude, you know, it's stuff that regular Army guys hate. But, and so I move over to Cav, and it's like, gotta be on your P's and Q's. You're already coming over here because you're in trouble, right? So, funny enough, I had to interview with the brigade chaplain, and basically he wanted to know, why are you being transferred here? Yeah. And so I told him what happened. And part of me getting in trouble was that I came forward with it to my unit. That's why they didn't crush me immediately. So I told him what happened, and he goes, oh, okay. And so I thought, not great, but hopefully, you know, I mean, I don't know at this point. I'm like at E4. I don't get to choose what happens to me, really. And so I'd come to find out later that he tried to refuse me. But because there was no other available chaplain assistants, he basically got overridden and was told, no, you're going to take him. Yeah. And so I went to first 114 and I was their chaplain assistant. And I remember I met the first sergeant, the headquarters first sergeant, and First Sergeant Smear, big tall guy. And my group chaplain assistant, at the time, Staff Sergeant Todd, was walking me around, kind of like, hey, First Sergeant, this is going to be your new chaplain assistant. This is Cheeks. And First Sergeant Smear looks at me and he goes, welcome. Don't fuck it up. And then walked away, and I was like, what am I getting into? Like, this is the regular Army. Oh, no. So I ended up deploying with these guys, and we get put on FOB Apache, and generally chaplain assistants don't pull guard duty because we're assigned to an officer. There are duties and responsibilities that the chaplain has that he needs an assistant available to him 24/7, right? Yeah. So soldier dies, you know, stuff like that, family issue, some counseling or what have you. So generally, chaplain assistants don't pull guard duty. Yeah. We were very shorthanded, and my new chaplain hadn't really gotten to the base yet, or no, he was out visiting somebody. He had gotten there sooner than I had by like a week or two. And so I was pulling guard duty, and we were relieving this unit from Alaska, the 25th Infantry Division. We were relieving one of their companies, and it wasn't, I'd been to Afghanistan before by this point. Yeah. The ship wasn't very tight. It's just the nicest way to put it. So their gate guard standards were really lax. I remember they were making fun of us for showing up in like full body armor and everything. They're like, what are you guys doing? Nothing ever happens out here. That's the one thing I remember specifically hearing is nothing ever happens out here. And I immediately was like, oh, this is Afghanistan. Everything happens everywhere. It doesn't matter what. And so the next day I was pulling guard duty. I believe it was 1500 was my shift. And I showed up a little early to relieve my guy. And had my full kit on. This is a defining point of this moment. Could have been changed everything. So when coming from group, I was used to having like all the Gucci accessories for my rifle. So like when I was with group, I had like an L-can, like a 1 to 3 power optic with like a red dot, a doctor sight on top of it, and blah blah blah, and I had a light and a laser, and just the SOP mod essentials basically. I had a really cool M4, and then when I got to Cav, and I had a pistol too, right? Yeah. So I had like a M9, and when I got to Cav, they were like, "Here's your M4 with your red dot," and I was like, so I was talking to the supply guy, and I was like, "Hey man, like I'm gonna be out and about with the chaplain. Do you have any ACOGs? Like I'll take an ACOG, like or I gotta buy my own or whatever." Yeah. And he goes, I have one ACOG, and he's like, I'm too busy today. I'll hand receipt it to you when we get to Afghanistan. I was like, all right, cool. So we get to Afghanistan. We're like zeroing our weapons because they put you through all that and everything. When you get into country, you go like to the range and you zero and everything. And so prior to going to the range at zero, I was like, hey, Sergeant, blah, blah, blah. can we do that hand receipt so I can get that ACOG? And he goes, no, I'm going to keep the ACOG. And I was like, can I ask for who? And he goes, well, I want to keep it for me. And I was like, you're going to be on CAF. Like, I've been here before. My last duty state, or my first deployment I did here. You're not going to need an ACOG here. Yeah. Like, I'm going to be out and about traveling. Yeah. Like, I need the ACOG. And he said, no. And I said, all right. So I volunteer for guard duty because we're short staffed at the time. Fob Apache wasn't at full strength yet. Most of the other guys hadn't arrived. And so the first day I'm on guard duty, and I'm kind of just like, this is wild the way these guys that we're ripping with are handling guard duty. And the next day I'm on guard duty so the way the base was laid out, there's like Fob Apache, and then there's a big soccer field. It was like a big track with a soccer field inside of it, and then stadium-style seating on the far side away from our base, and then on that side of the soccer field was the Afghani base, the Afghan National Army guys. So my little checkpoint was like at the corner, and they hadn't really built it out yet. This Fob Apache would eventually get much bigger. Yeah. But at this point, they hadn't done any of that expansion yet. So I'm at this little tower checkpoint situation coming off the soccer field. And I'm like looking out towards like no man's land, which is like the perimeter, outside the base. And walking around, I remember I came on shift, relieved my guy, charged my weapon, loaded my weapon, and turned on my red dot, and like looked down it, made sure it was lit for this time of day and everything. And just kind of looking around, and it was me, 2 Romanian army guys, and then one of our soldiers was a Romanian immigrant, and he spoke okay English, but like essentially like 3 Romanian guys with me. He had a 249, but we didn't have belt ammo yet. And so the 249 can feed from a regular M4 magazine. It's not great. You don't want to do it, but it'll do it. And so he had a 249 with a magazine in it. And I remember I was looking out towards no man's land, and I heard some burst fire start going off. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? We had a range in that vicinity. So I knew that, like, in my head, I was like, okay, it's not an uncommon noise, but like no one told us there's a range today. And I look out towards the field, and it's all these dudes from the unit that we're relieving, and they're running towards my tower. Oh my God, he shot him. I can't believe he shot him. And so I look at the 3 other guys that were with me, and this little checkpoint that we were on was like the right side of the checkpoint. If you're leaving it, is like a tower, and then like, a little hut area for us, a little shaded area for us. And then the other side is like those little halvesy Heskos, those like the waist high ones. And so I yelled at them. I was like, against the Heskos now. And so there's like 8 of them. And so we were all, the 4 of us were posted up looking out over the soccer field. And still got these dudes coming running towards us. None of these guys had brought their weapons out with them when they were out there playing football. Which was like, to me, again, it was like, that's wild, because if I'm a checkpoint and you go past me, like, you're outside the wire for all intents and purposes, right? So none of these guys have brought their weapons with them. So these dudes are running past us, and like, that's a complication, right? I don't want to wing a dude who's fleeing. No. But they're like in our little field of fire, essentially. And I didn't see the shooting take place. So all I knew is that someone was shooting. I didn't know where they were shooting from. I didn't know if they were on the field or not. I didn't know if fire was coming from the Afghani base. And so I'm like scanning, and I see a dude who's like, he's an Afghani, and his body language is weird. He's just not doing what everybody else is doing, right? And so I look to the army guy, the other army guy, I don't want to say his name. I looked at him, and I said, hey man, like, did you see what happened? And as soon as he said no, I heard another burst go off. And I looked back over the field, and I saw an American come off of his feet and then land on his back, like he had been basically lifted off the ground from gunfire, right? Gosh. And so I was like, what the fuck is happening? And I turned around and I looked at the tower, because you could see into the doorway for the tower. And I could see two of these dudes huddled, like kind of crouched down, looking around in the tower. And I knew that the walkie-talkie for base defense was on the table in the tower. And so I yelled at them, get on the radio, tell base defense that we're taking fire at Tower 1. And so I turned my attention back to the field, and I'm listening, and I hear them, B-Doc, Tower 1 taking fire. And I said, perfect. Now the base knows what's happening, right? Yes. And so I go back to focusing on the soccer field, and I still notice that dude, that Afghani, who by this point I realize he's the only guy armed out there. And I want to say this is a contributing factor. This is when President Obama had taken office, and there was a lot of dudes getting grilled for like shooting folk who weren't supposed to be shot, right? Yeah. And combat is not always so clear cut with that. Like you don't always get, especially the way that these green on blue situations were going down, right? Yes. So I didn't want to create an international incident, basically. And so I thought if anyone was a threat on this field, it's this guy. He's the only armed Afghani out there. And but I didn't see him do any of the shooting, so I can't just start putting rounds into this guy. So I'm watching him, and he kind of wanders over to the guy that I had saw get shot. And he kind of stands over him and looks at him, and then he brings he had an M16. Brings the M16 up and goes blam, blam, and double taps him. And I was like, oh, you're my guy. Yeah. And so I brought my rifle up, and he wasn't far away. He was like 150 meters.
That's not far at all.
No. And, like, I've never fired my weapon in combat before, so there's so much that I'm trying to, like, process and go through. And, like, I remember having the thought, like, while I was, like, aiming at him, I was like, oh, I should go for a headshot. And then I was like, you need to take the shots you can make right now. Yes. And so he was bladed to me, and so I started aiming underneath his armpit. I was aiming for his heart, right? Yeah. And so I lined up on him. He was walking, and I shot it once, and he kind of jolted, and he kept walking, and then I shot him again, and then he kind of jolted again. One of the NCOs from the unit that we were relieving had come, and dust had kicked up from me shooting, and so I quit firing because I couldn't really see through the dust. Yeah. And one of the NCOs had ran over to me and was like, give me your weapon. And I was like, no, like, why? And he reached over and tore my rifle. I had it like connected like to a little, like a elastic sling point right here. And he broke the connector. He just tore it from me. And I was like, I don't have a rifle. Lame. And so, and then one of his E4s took the 249 from the guy next to me. And I remember being like, what do? I don't have a weapon. And so I went to run back inside the base, and for whatever reason, General Order Number 1 popped up in my head. It was like, I'll guard everything within my limits of my post and quit my post only when properly relieved. And my brain was like, you weren't properly relieved. And so I was like, oh, shit. So I went running back to the checkpoint. I'd only gotten like 20 meters away. I started hearing a lot of fire by this point. And basically, one of the guys from the unit that was out there, he had ran onto base, got to his hooch, grabbed his weapon, and ran back out. And so I linked up I knew him. I talked to him a couple times, and I linked up with him. We ran out onto the field, and I recovered my rifle. I said, hey, man, where's my rifle? To NCO, that E5. And he goes, it's over there. It's black. And so I okay. So I picked up my rifle, put a new magazine in. We're pulling security on this wounded guy. When I went running out there, one of the other soldiers had been killed, the initial volley of fire. His name is Dustin. So when a bunch of us when I ran out there, was a couple others had ran out onto the soccer field basically and checked on, he goes, hey, check on him. And so I ran over to who I learned to be was Dustin Napier. And I don't want to describe the nature of his injuries, but ran up to him and assessed him. And I basically was like, yeah, my first time doing all this, but this guy looks pretty dead, right? Yeah. So ran out there and got my weapon. Basically what happened was when that E5 had taken my weapon from me, one of the National Guardsmen that we had on our base, the National Guard were bivouacked right next to the wall. So they heard the rounds go over from the Afghani initially firing. And they heard the rounds go zipping over the wall, and they also were like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
And so one of their medics had climbed a tower and started putting rounds into this guy. That was the other fire that I heard, basically. And so he, by his own account, put something like 4 or 5 rounds into this guy. And every time this guy would take a round, he would like take a knee and get back up and start walking again. And then one of the National Guard infantrymen had a M14. He climbed a tower and he plugged this dude in the head and he was dead by that point. So the volley of fire that I had heard was basically the E5 that took my weapon from me. Once this guy was dead on the ground, had ran up to him and basically mag dumped into this guy and then dropped my rifle and started helping the wounded guy. So that was like the guy that I saw get double tapped. He ended up living, but then, you know, Dustin obviously passed away. And so I had to do their help with their memorial ceremony and everything. But it became kind of this whole thing. It was very strange the way it got handled. And so that really was like the icebreaker for the rest of my time with Cav. Yeah. Because I became that chaplain assistant that shot a guy. And so when we would go visit guys, and so like we had grunts and we had a company of infantry guys attached to us. And so like I would go visit the infantry guys or I would go visit my Cav guys. And it was always the same where me and the chaplain would show up and they'd kind of give us the lay of the land, because that's what we do in theaters. We rotate around, we do services and talk to guys if they need it. And it was always like, hey, are you that chaplain assistant that shot that guy? I'd be like, yeah. Like, dude, that's awesome. You want to come play Xbox? You know, like that was my weird little icebreaker for that deployment. But I ended up being very fortunate. My chaplain, funny enough, was also from Tacoma. So we kind of knew, we kind of grew up in the same area. Chaplain Rick Pock, to this day, one of my very closest friends. Very hard to describe the working relationship that we had as chaplain and assistant, other than like a God thing. Yeah. We were very perfectly suited to work for each other, or work with each other, and me to work for him. And so that deployment definitely was very, it was strangely enough a little bit more kinetic than my deployment with SF, because I ended up hitting a small IED on that deployment. I almost got crushed during a sling load operation by a Chinook that lost lift basically right over the top of the container. We had that green on blue. There was just a lot that really happened, but
it sounds like a lot compared to what a normal chaplain assistant would go through.
There's a few of us out there that have fired our weapons. There's not a lot, but there's a few of us out there that have fired our weapons. If you ever watch Hornet's Nest is based around No Slack. Okay. Their chaplain assistant, I'm pretty sure, had quite a bit of trigger time. Yeah. Because he was always out with his guys. And I think, like I said, part of being a good chaplain assistant, good chaplain team, is reading the room, knowing when you're wanted and when you're not wanted. I don't get to tell infantry units, I don't get to tell squads and platoons, hey, I'm coming with you, right? A good chaplain assistant be like, what are you guys doing? Would you mind if me and the chaplain come out with you guys? You got to think, a platoon leader has a lot to deal with already. Platoon sergeant, platoon leader. The last thing they want is like for them to be maneuvering through an area and then the chaplain or the chaplain assistant step on something and lose a leg, right? You're going to be, even if you did everything right, you're going to be that guy that got the chappie hurt, which is like, nobody wants that. And so, and that part of my job as a chaplain assistant is to screen that basically. So when me and the chaplain, we had a big, called a named operation, but we had a big mission for the squadron. And, we had multiple entities moving in this mission. We had our engineers were part of this, our grunts were part of this, our couple of our CAV companies were, or both of our CAV companies were part of this. Headquarters had a part in this. So the colonel was going to be on the battlefield as well. So I looked at all this And, my chaplain Pock was like, hey, where do you think we fit in this whole picture? And I said, honestly, I think we should be with the route clearance guys, because my fear for you, sir, is us being out with the Cav scouts or the infantry guys and you stepping on something. Ironically enough, I think we're safest with the guys looking for the IEDs.
And that makes total sense.
And so, we went out with the Essayons, as we called them. And that's when I had a big piece of equipment dropped on my leg. And that's an injury that the VA is still to this day saying not service related. It's my favorite. This is evidence in your favor. Treatment of condition while in service, not service related.
And that's ridiculous. With VA injuries and stuff, there's people who have things that have nothing to do with their service, but because it happened while they were active duty, there's no argument.
Yeah.
And then there's people that had real things happen to them in service, and they're like, it's not service connected. So I haven't found that, like, where the reality kicks in for them. And I think it really just depends on your rater at that point.
Yeah, it was really strange. I'm at 70% myself. When I initially filed for my disability compensation claim, I filed for PTSD, tinnitus, and knee and back stuff, just by nature of being on jump status. Like I had a couple bad landings. My thumb on my right hand was kind of jacked up from one of my landings, and it was like, I think because, and like again, I don't know for certain. I think because one of my PTSD claims was that green on blue incident. Yeah. Because that was tied into other dudes who had gotten wounded and killed. I think there was like zero pushback on that. And then I had one of my raiders tell me, the doctor for my tinnitus claim, he said, so what's it sound like? And I go, it's high-pitched ringing. It comes and goes. The most notable part is that sometimes there's a pop, and then everything, like hearing goes away, then comes back slowly. And he goes, I'm going to put down that you have tinnitus only because I can't prove that you don't. Yeah. And I was like, cool, thanks, right? But then, like, when I went to talk about my PTSD claim, talking about, like, having to do, I think by that point I had done something like 18 memorial ceremonies, which in the grand scheme of things, if you talk to other chaplain assistants that have been around longer, 18 is not a lot. Yeah. I know guys that have done over 100 memorial ceremonies. And like I said, memorial ceremonies don't get easier, but it was weird. Like when I went to do that, I talked to the psychologist, talked about that. I basically got through like two of, I guess I would say there's like 4 incidents that occurred during my time in service that to me kind of changed how I react to things. And I got through like 2 of them, and he goes, all right, well, he did the old, well, I got what I need. And I was like, I'm not even done. There's way more stuff than that. And he goes, no, I think I got you. So that was like an automatic 50% or something. Yeah. But so yeah, it's, VA is the VA. It's frustrating. I just had surgery, as you know, and had to have my gallbladder taken out. And that was interesting because, like, I think instinctually or just by nature of myself, kind of easygoing. Yeah. And so I don't like get really hamstrung about a lot of things, or I don't really get hung up on a lot of stuff. So the gallbladder thing, I woke up one morning and just the most unimaginable pain I have ever felt in my life in my stomach. Like, I think heartburn after a heavy night of drinking times 10. Just awful. And I told my wife, like, I got to go to the VA. Like, I got to go. This is bad. Yeah. And so I get to the VA. I'm in the ER. And I'm in so much pain that I'm standing up. They put me in the hospital gown and everything. I'm in my little ER room. I'm standing up, stomping my feet on the ground and biting into the gown because I'm in such pain. And she goes, okay, we're going to give you some oral lidocaine and some Maalox. And I was like, I've never had this happen before, so I can't tell you if that's effective treatment or pain management or not. I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. Just take the edge off, something. Yeah. So they gave me that. I end up there. they do an ultrasound. They thought they saw something weird on my liver, so they did an MR or a CT scan. The liver was fine, but what they thought it was gallbladder.
Yeah.
And so they were like, we sent this over to our general surgery team, and the general surgery team wants nothing to do with you.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, I don't know what that means. And she goes, we contacted Nellis. Nellis has a gastroenterology team and an internal medicine team and all of that. So Nellis said they'll take you. So we're going to have you ambulanced over to Nellis. So this whole thing, I get ambulanced over there. They take my vitals again. They take blood sample, blah, blah, blah. Because they're measuring like gallbladder symptoms come with like physiological changes. One of them is like a higher, what's called bilirubin count. Yeah. And so the surgeon came to speak with me because they were like, we're pretty certain you're going to have your gallbladder removed. And at the time I was like, I have a care plan for my animals, you know, like my wife's traveling. And so yeah, anyway, by the time I got there and I was in the MSU, it's called the multi-service unit. They were like, the surgeon came and he was like, so here's the thing. I'm looking at he was like looking at my new vitals that they had taken that morning. And he goes, your levels are like normal. They've normalized. So what this could have been was like the gallbladder attack basically. But we're fairly certain you need to just have this thing removed. Yeah. And so he's like looking at the imaging because they ended up doing an MRI, a full on MRI. So he goes, looking at the MRI, looking at the CT scan, you know, building from the ultrasound up. He goes, there's no blockage, which is the biggest concern with your gallbladder is there being a stone that blocks. But at the end of the day, but looking at this, he goes, you know, we just think you need to have this thing pulled out. So eventually there's a back and forth occurs to summarize, but I end up leaving the hospital and then being okay for a day and then having to come back into the hospital. And then, yeah, they just took it out. But big shout out to 99th Medical Group over here at Nellis because they were fantastic. I didn't feel any sort of way about the medical care I got there. It was just really good. The doctors were great. The nurses were great. The technicians were great. Everyone was really nice.
Hell yeah.
Maybe I'm just a Army dude who's used to being, you know, being mean to or people being mean to him. But I was really cared for and they did a fantastic job. So big shout out to them.
That's awesome.
They did great.
So couple of final things for you.
Yeah.
As a chaplain's assistant that has experience not only stacking up bodies, but also, I know that's a crazy way to say that.
Yeah. I dabbled. Yeah, I dabbled.
Yeah. But you also had your experience that we talked about in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. Taking those two things and combining it together, what the fuck am I trying to say? 5. So, as a chaplain's assistant that has battlefield experience, but also some time in Hollywood where you got to have hands-on experience doing that. One thing I want to know is if there's a younger veteran who is looking to get experience doing something similar to like Hollywood, or they're having a tough time, what is some advice that you would give to them?
Tough time, you mean like finding their place getting out, or?
Yeah, finding their place getting out, the transitional process. Yeah. Everyone kind of goes through it.
So because I was a chaplain assistant, because I talked to guys who I thought had, not that they didn't, but because I'd spent most of my time caring for guys who, in my estimation, had real problems versus my problems, which were not real, I guess you would say, right? Like, I'm the chaplain assistant. I know how to handle my stuff because I tell guys how to manage their stuff all the time, right? I'm fine. When I got out, I wasn't fine. And, you know, my mom, very thankfully, was very honest with me. She goes, you know, Dan, I don't think you're broken, but there's definitely stuff. Sorry, you gotta, she goes, you know, honey, I think, not that you're broken, but there's something different. Yeah. There seem to be things you don't handle well anymore. And she was right. There was a element of agoraphobia that I had to kind of get over with, which is really strange because I'm the chaplain assistant. I love talking to people, but I hate being in bars now. I hate being places that are loud. I hate, I have very little patience for people, which is like, can't be the chaplain assistant and not be patient. You got to listen to the same shenanigans all the time. But so part of that was being honest about needing to get care for the stuff that I was struggling with. The big challenge of that is identifying it, right? So you got to know, okay, like what's wrong with me? I don't know. I think I'm fine. That took some honesty and some kind of, mental note taking. How did this interaction go? Could it have been better? I kind of already do that anyway. But it took, me having to spend the time to identify it and then tell people why I think it needs to be better, how I used to be better at it. In terms of the film industry, really, it's hard to say. Like I truthfully couldn't tell where a veteran where to start. Like you guys, for example, you're going for it. Yeah, that's how I started. I started just by going for it,
just showing up on set.
Yeah, I found out that LA Film School would take the GI Bill, and I was like, yeet, I'm going to California, guys, and I'd always wanted to work in film. I was always fascinated by film. I always thought the second coolest thing to the actual film itself was the behind the scenes that I might find. And so it's not a financially stable thing to get into initially. It's very feast or famine. It's very gig work. It's very, sometimes you'll get great gigs that pay really well, and then sometimes you'll go months or weeks without getting any paid work, which sucks. The best advice I can give to any veteran who wants to join the film industry or get into the film industry is read the room, realize where you are, stow all that nonsense about liberals and the film industry and blah, blah, blah. If you're really serious about the craft of filmmaking and you're really serious about the storytelling, about working as part of a team on a project that is bigger than you, show up open-minded, ready to do work. I'm not saying that I haven't met people that have ruffled my feathers from either side of political spectrum, but really film work is not about that. It's about doing the work. It's about being good on set and do everything that might have made you successful in the military. Like I said, me impressing you is because I'm the guy that was like the best trash taker outer. Yeah. Do that. I mean, when I got to Guys Grocery Games, the first season was kind of me learning where I fit in, where as a PA in this big picture. The second season is when I made my contribution to the set, which was like I kind of redesigned how production was storing things. Yeah. And so production had what we called in that old location affectionately called the catwalk. Which wasn't a catwalk. It was just behind the set. So if you're unfamiliar with Grocery Games was originally filmed in the first couple of seasons in a functioning supermarket. Yes. They then moved into a warehouse that they rented out and built a functioning supermarket. All that food in there is real. Everything is real. That food all goes bad. They donate it at the end of every season. They have, because they're tracking all those food items get tracked. So, they know what goes bad when. Stuff that they can donate gets donated, and it's really cool to see. There's like 4 or 5 different entities from Santa Rosa that come through and pick up food for the local food banks and stuff like that. So
you had a FIFO guy.
What was that?
You had a first in, first out guy, to cycle the food out and everything.
Yeah, that and again, that's part of the culinary team. They're all tracking that, and they're all because God forbid a chef cooks something that's expired on during the show. But so anyway. My big contribution was like the catwalk was just a jumbled mess essentially. And so I organized and labeled things and said, if like someone wanted to go buy and find toilet paper will always exist here now, something like that. And so I kind of found a way to like put my little touch on, however big or small, on helping production. And so, figure out where you fit in. I was very fortunate to meet, first and second AC team, a guy named Trevor Taylor and a good friend of mine, Nicole Kent. Nicole Kent was the second AC, and she really taught me most of the fundamentals that I ended up learning about being a second AC, transitioning into camera world and stuff like that. And, a lot of that is no one owes you any of this. No one owes you anything just because you're a veteran or you're in the military or whatever. Like nobody owes you anything for that. It's on you to kind of convince people, hey, like, I want to be here. I want to be part of this. Can you help me out? Like you have the expertise, and I'm very fortunate to have people who've invested in me, coming from the film side. And I think film is so important. Film today needs to be treated the way that the World War II veterans treated it back then. Obviously, there's cultural differences and there's different zeitgeists, however you want to describe what's going on in the world at the time, or in the nation or the country or whatever. But who wrote Band of Brothers? Who wrote Saving Private Ryan? Who wrote, Full Metal Jacket? Most of these guys were lefties, right? So stow all that nonsense, and because people need to hear our stories. We have generations of veterans that are disappearing without their stories being told, right? The Korean War vets are the current generation at risk, very closely followed by the Vietnam War vets, in terms of they are a disappearing resource in terms of what happened over there, their stories, right? So I was very fortunate prior to COVID that I was able to fly home and set up like this and interview my grandfather. And I have about, I want to say close to 50 hours of footage with my grandfather, asking him about earliest memory up to present day, about his time in Korean War, all of that. And, there's some really great organizations that are out there doing those interviews. It's really important. Yes. I think it's really important for these guys to have their stories told, because as we know with AI, like what we're seeing today is people who don't have a trained eye for what's real on screen and what doesn't look real, they're buying into stuff. And it's I don't think a far cry to say that we could see the actual stories of these veterans getting muddied by people who want to create content to get clicks. So we need the good stuff basically, and we need it today. Guys got to focus on it today. So if you're a veteran, you want to get in filmmaking, you want to get into that, there's lots of film schools out there that'll take the GI Bill. There's lots of ways to get on set as quick as you can. Not that film school isn't helpful. You don't necessarily need it. If you can get on set, you have a good attitude, you can convince people to keep bringing you back to set, you'll eventually learn everything you need to learn on set. Film school is helpful, but not necessary. So it's very much like culinary school. You can go to culinary school, but someone's going to go, okay, but can you cook? Right? Film school is the same way. All right, so you went to film school. Do you know how to behave on set? Do you know, if I tell you to wrap that stinger up, do you know what I'm talking about? If I go to ask you to hang a light, are you going to hang that light safely? If I tell you to change a lens on a camera, are you going to handle that camera lens like it's a $20,000 camera lens? Because most of the time they are, right? There's a process to do all that. So go after it. If you're getting into film, recognize that right now is a kind of strange time for the film industry. But if not the film industry at large, start your own thing and start learning how to do your own camera stuff, start learning about lighting, everything I try to help you guys with, because like I said, you just go for it, right? And you're going to learn most of your lessons that you learn by going for it. And it's going to be through failure. That's how a lot of it's going to get learned. And there's going to be this missed opportunities, unfortunately, but it'll be, I think it ends up being something very fulfilling, and it ends up being a skill that can kind of really go anywhere. TikTok is driven by film. Instagram, social media, a lot of these things are driven by podcasts. You look at like Joe Rogan's not an audio book. He films that. All these guys, they're all film driven. There's lots of lots of ways to get work, I guess. So sometimes you have to create your own work. So
Awesome. Well, Cheeks, thanks you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for sharing some stories. And that's a wrap.